Thank you very much, Sandy. And a nice warm welcome to members. It's our Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee today. I'm not on mute. I'm being asked if I'm on mute. Can everybody hear me, just so I'm sure? Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Just I've got somebody here in the same room trying to connect. So
I can hear you, Ian, but we can't see you.
Oh. There you go. Sorry about that. Thank you. I'll have that on with him. So, good morning, members. Very, very warm welcome to our Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee this morning. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through the Council's website. Can I please remind you, I'll just wait for this. Can I please remind you of a few arrangements in the guidance note? Microphones should be muted and videos switched off when you're not addressing the meeting of the committee. Should you wish to contribute to an item, you should speak in the Teams chat function, and you'll be invited to speak thereafter. We'll accept a hand if we can catch that, so hopefully Tracy will be able to pick up and make me available, or somebody else if that's the case. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be taken by a roll call. If any members have to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or could you write leave in the Teams chat function and then join. This is required. Join when you come back. This is required to allow us to record the members' presence, and please do not use the chat function for any contributions that are material to debates. We need to hear them through the audio chat if that's possible. I see Claire, you're in. Part of the welcome, thanks for coming in. Part of the just it helps everybody as far as the processes and for streaming and such like. If you turn your video off, that's okay. But when you come in to talk, please turn it back on. And you just missed that wee piece. Thank you. So, said in apologies, and this is the chair's approval of members' remote partition. But Tracy, I know that Councillor Bell's been in touch with myself this morning. He's struggling to get connection in any way, shape or form. I think their internet's down in that area and he's only got a 3G signal, so he can't get in. So he is an apology this morning, I know that. Tracy, said in apologies.
Yeah, morning Chair, morning members. We've got 12 members present. I have apologies from Councillor Bell, like you say, Chair, as well as Councillor Dryborough. Councillor Scobie is not present at the start of the meeting. Okay,
thank you, Tracy. I would imagine he'll be here at some point. I do approve the members' remote participation, so we'll go right up and running now. Any declarations of interest, item number 2, that any members wish to make? I don't see any hands coming up. I take it there's nothing in the chat function. There's no messages there, so we'll take that as no declarations of interest. Item number 3 is a minute of the previous meeting. So we'll look to see if there's MD got any. We'll look to approve this today, obviously. Do we feel it's a true reflection of the meeting that we had? I felt the appendix was a good reflection. I know we've seen that previously at the full council, but I thought it was a good reflection in regards to the debate we had in the trunk roads. Captured it well.
Agree the minutes, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McGee. So then agreed. Item number 4 is external audit plan for 2021 reports by the Head of Finance and Procurement. Similar notes. I'll just ask who's here to. Is yourself, Joanne, probably coming in to speak to this? I see your camera coming on there. Thanks, Joanne. And if there's any of that unclear, right, excellent. Thank you. Over to you.
Morning, members. What you have in front of you is our external audit plan. This is year 5 of a 6-year appointment, and you'll probably be quite familiar with the layout of the plan. Obviously, within it, we confirm we're independent of the council and we can act as your external auditors. In terms of the plan itself, it's effectively a roadmap over the audit year, which includes an assessment of our audit risks and our planned approach. And if I just pass you over to Claire, Claire's the new external audit manager for this year. So if I pass over, she can introduce herself. And what we'll do is we'll just pick up the key points within the plan and then we'll open it out to members' questions.
Thanks, Joanne. Welcome, Claire.
Thanks, Joanne. As Joe mentioned, I'm Claire Connor and I'm the new external audit manager for Dumfries and Galloway Council. As Joe said, I will take you through our external audit planning considerations document. I will take it as read and I will talk you through our planned overview, which is on page 3 of our report and page 7 of the committee papers. We note in section 1 our considerations around group audit scope and risk assessment. And here we note that we've considered Dumfries and Galloway Council as the only component to be individually financially significant to the Dumfries and Galloway Council group. We note here that Suez Trans, from a group perspective, is considered to be neither significant nor material, and as such, we plan for a full scope audit of the Council using our materiality, and will perform analytical procedures using our group materiality over all other consolidated balances, which includes consolidated Suez Trans and IJB balances. Section 2 takes you through our considerations around materiality. We note here that we've calculated plan and materiality using gross expenditure less IJB contributions as per the 2019 and 2020 financial statements. We calculated plan and materiality using 1.5%, and this gave us a plan and materiality of 7.5 million. Performance materiality, which is the level we use in order to calculate our testing approach, is based on 70% of this plan and materiality. This 70% is a reduction of the prior year rate, which was 75%. And this is to recognise that although there were no material uncorrected misstatements identified in the prior year, it is reflecting the perceived increased risk of material misstatement due to error in the financial statements as a result of COVID-19 and its impact on Dumfries and Galloway Council. We note here that we've capped our trivial threshold at £250,000 in line with the Audit Scotland guidance, and what that essentially means is that we will report to you all corrected and uncorrected misstatements above this level in our final audit report. And we also note here that we'll use a lower materiality of £5,000 when we audit the remuneration report. And finally, we note here that we will continue to revisit our materiality during the course of the audit, and it will be updated based on the unaudited 2020-2021 financial statements. Section 3 outlines our audit risks. As noted there, that's management override of controls, the risk of fraud and expenditure recognition, valuation of land, buildings and dwellings, and valuation of defined benefit pension schemes. And we highlight here that we've rebutted the presumed risk of fraud and revenue recognition. However, we are recognising the accounting treatment of COVID-19 grant income as an area of audit focus, and we will continue to assess the appropriateness of this rebuttal throughout the course of the audit. Section 4 takes you through our considerations around wider scope audit. In accordance with the code, we've identified wider scope risks in the following areas: financial sustainability, governance and transparency, and demonstrating best value. And Section 5 takes you through other key audit matters that we wish to highlight, namely the changes in relation to ISA 540 in relation to accounting estimates, and the additional considerations that will be required in planning in relation to the changes in this standard. And we note here for Dumfries and Galloway Council, we anticipate this to relate to the valuation of property, plant and equipment, depreciation of property, plant and equipment, debtor provision, council tax provision, accrued income, expenditure accruals, and pension liabilities. And we also note here that in accordance with the code and planning guidance, we also complete a number of other audit deliverables to you, and they're further outlined in page 20 of our report, page 24 of the committee's papers. And Section 6 outlines our audit fees.
Thanks very much for that, Claire. That's appreciated. Joe, have you got anything to add before we go into questions?
No, happy just to answer any questions the members have.
Thank you, thanks very much. So we've got Councillor Davy Stick first, then Malcolm Johnston. I'll keep an eye on the chat. You first, Davy.
Thanks, Ian. Just on page 20 of the report, Nisdale Connected Trust Fund, could you give an explanation what that is? Because being a councillor for about 13 years, I've never ever heard it before, or whether I've missed it in future. Past paperwork, please.
I'll just leave it to yourselves to who's best to answer that, and if for some reason you're struggling, we'll just come back to it at some point. Okay.
I was just going to say we have further detail of that on page 16 of our report. I think that's page 20 of the committee papers.
Councillor Carruthers, can I just maybe come in here just to help out? The Nithsdale Connected Trusts is some of the council's trusts that have been amalgamated into a Nithsdale Connected Trust are still subject to the external audit process. These are the trusts that are subject to further refinement in terms of trying to extract them out into from the overall amalgamation process that we've been undertaking, and that process is still ongoing with legal services at the moment. So they are some of the council's trusts that effectively are still audited by the council's external audit because they come under the council rather than being treated as a separate body at this point.
Thanks, Gillian.
That's fine, Ian. Thanks very much.
Don't bother, David. And obviously, if you need any further information, catch that offline if you've got the exact detail in regards to that. Thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Malcolm Johnston. Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite an interesting report and plan, this. I'm pleased to see ISA 540 with the improved requirements for looking at these specific risks that are linked there, listed there. It's a pity we didn't have some of this previously, particularly in relation to accrued income. Now, you're going to require a lot of extra help, I would imagine, from officers, it says here, because you're going to have to try and pour into some of the background of the calculations. We've had a bit of a history in this council of documents not being available. So I hope you get all the support you require going forward. Now, page 2 of the audit plan, I would like just for a wee bit of reassurance that a deeper explanation of why we've rebutted the risk of fraud and income recognition. I appreciate you're going to revisit that throughout the audit, which is good. I'm pleased to hear that. But just a wee bit of strengthening as to an explanation as to the reason why you felt that was to be rebutted, because ultimately with the report under the 4G roads contract, it was income recognition that was part of the problem with that, and resulted in members being given poor information on which to make decisions. Also, when it comes to, I like the fact that we're again looking at the asset valuation, but I still can't help but feel there's a wee bit of a conflict potentially with being a council employee that values assets. This is maybe more of a governance question than a question for the audit plan, but if you could give me a wee bit of a background into the rebuttal.
Happy to do that. It's something that is required under ISA auditing standards around the consideration of the risk of fraud within income. Typically within public sector entities, that's reverted to the risk of fraud within expenditure, and that's referenced within FRC Practice Note 10. However, we do consider very carefully the risk of fraud within income. It's something we consider annually, specifically looking at the income streams available to the council. And what we're really looking at is the risk of material error within the financial statements themselves around income, particularly where there could be a risk of misstatement to either show an improved financial position or a potential misstatement or risk of fraud. So when we're looking at your income streams, we're looking at the nature of those income streams, the ability management would have to adopt potentially a different accounting treatment for that income, or potentially push the income from one financial year to the other, particularly around cut-off. So for us, when we're looking at that income, a vast majority of that comes quite straightforward through in terms of your council tax. It comes through government grant monies. So we felt that actually looking at where the risk lies, we would pinpoint that risk more on expenditure. However, we do recognise this year in particular is going to be a challenging year for the council in terms of the additional income that is coming through in terms of COVID recovery, and us working very closely with the council around the nature of that COVID money, and is there a greater risk this year that there may be misaccounting of that income, whether that income flows through the council and out on an agency behalf, or whether the council themselves can determine the spend. So we're just keeping a watching brief on the COVID income in particular as a new income stream this year, and we're working very closely with finance just now as part of our planning work to understand the nature of that money, how that's likely to be accounted for, and what's within the council and what's external to the council. So every year we do consider it. As we go and complete our planning work, we will continue to ask ourselves whether that's still appropriate. But ultimately, we're looking at a risk of material misstatement and potential risk of greater risk of fraud. So at that point, we're comfortable looking at those income streams that we can rebut that assumption.
Malcolm, I'll just make sure you're content, or anything you want to add?
I'm happy with that. It was just another aspect of it. I was just wondering what the resource implications were for some of this extra work for the ISA 540.
Yeah. So we've always been required to comply with ISA 540. There's been some revision in terms of the nature of the work that we complete at planning and interim. What we have working with officers with is our planning inquiries, and as part of that there's an accounting estimates return where we're asking officers to, for each significant judgment or estimate within the accounts, to outline how that estimate's made, the data that's been made, the data available to make that estimate, whether it's a standard estimate or there's inherent risk within that. Once we've collated all those responses under our responsibilities under the ISAs, we'll circulate this back to this committee for your information so that you can see officers' responses around accounting estimates. There is a little bit of additional work this year. We're trying to build that into our planning, working closely with Gillian and the finance team. In terms of year end, depending on the nature of your estimates and judgments, there will be additional work over certain of those, particularly where there may be a greater risk around the judgment. But we'll continue to work with officers around that, and we're comfortable that can be accommodated within the external audit timeline and still sufficient time for us to deliver and sign the audit in September.
You okay with that, Malcolm?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks, Joe, for your answers. Just, I suppose, so I've got two other speakers at the moment. Just before I bring in Stephen, just a small comment which I'll make is that I notice obviously Victoria Stirling is audit in charge. She's wrote to me again, I think it's for the fourth year in a row now. I generally don't reply back because we've always had a conversation in regards to fraud and corruption, and I've had more evidence put in front of me over the last recent while, which would indicate even stronger indications that there is actually fraud and corruption going on within Dumfries and Galloway Council, has been in the past certainly. So I mean, that's maybe an offline conversation we need to have, Joe. I think we do need to pick up on that. Let's get to that point. I did mention it at full council, but there's been further information again since then. So I won't be replying to Victoria again for the reason that I do think at this moment in time there potentially is fraud and corruption going on. So then I'll bring Stephen in after that. I don't know if you want to comment, Joe.
No, thanks for that, Chair. As part of our planning inquiries, we're required to ask standard questions to certain individuals across the council, and yourself as Audit Committee Chair is one of those individuals. So potentially, if you're comfortable, could we pick that up as a conversation offline, and we could discuss the best way to do that in terms of the confirmation? I'd be happy to have a meeting out with this, if that would be okay.
Absolutely, we'd have to be away from here, obviously.
Yeah.
With the confidential related to that. Thank you, Joe. Stephen? Councillor Thompson, that is.
Thanks, Ian. Chair, even. Yes, it was just sort of on the back of Councillor Johnson's point about I think he touched on just the appointment of Colliers as the external valuer. And obviously in the report itself, our council report at 3.5, it does focus on that ISA 540 standard. I mean, that's maybe... I noticed you just say you note the change, but obviously that's pertains to that closer look at how we value stuff, and just tied to that, one of the things that's always a sort of area of interest for me is how the council deals with common good. Now there's a kind of an understanding that any value of common good property or assets is sort of hypothecated, I don't know how you would call it, but sort of treated separately in a sense, even though we hold title and sort of administer it effectively. But is that, I didn't notice that alluded to at all. I know you've touched on Swestrans and IJB. Common good isn't external, yet it is sort of separate in a sense, but I don't know how that could best be captured. I just sort of wondered, is there a way that you look at that? Because because we're kind of on an ongoing journey of discovery with common good in terms of what transpires has been common good, so it sort of limits what we can and can't do with those funds or assets. So I'm just sort of wondering if that's something that the audit would have any interest in, or if it's relevant. Thank you, Chair.
So within the council's financial statements themselves, there's a number of notes that appear related to common good, recognising the nature of those assets and how they have effectively been ring-fenced from other council assets. So from our perspective as your external auditor, we look at those disclosures and we test that note within the financial statements back to the underlying records. What we do have within the financial statements is materiality, and ultimately common good from memory is below materiality, but we do ensure that the disclosures that are in place within the financial statements are in line with the accounting code of practice, and we do consider the nature of that disclosure.
Okay, just on the below the threshold of materiality, I'm just sort of taken as a collective sum, because it goes into the millions, obviously, in terms of the total assets in that, but each individual element of common good, if you like, might be below materiality. So there's not an aggregated, an aggregation sort of consideration. No. And generally there's not particular movements within your common good. Just as you referenced earlier, there's quite a lot of restrictions on how you can use common good assets, which sometimes makes them very difficult to use. So in particular, we look at any new additions or any disposals or any particular changes in year. We would specifically look at testing that as well as the disclosures, but typically your common good stays quite similar each financial statement. Just one final comment, if I may, Chair. Just on that, though, I appreciate, obviously you'll have seen this as auditors over the last years, but in 2017, I think, there was obviously a sale of what was common good land to DGHP, which then got returned, and that was like to the value of 750,000 to $1 million. I can't remember what the exact figure was, but it was significant and attracted a lot of interest at the time. And then we ended up getting it back, but it wasn't common good anymore. So effectively, it's sort of been, the common good had been laundered out of it, if you like. But I don't know how that would have shown up, because I don't recall that appearing as part of an external audit report. So it's just a curiosity, really. So forgive me for asking the question.
So I'm trying to remember 2017, but sometimes can't remember last month. But I think in terms of the transactions, that would have flowed into the disclosure within the financial statements. But for example, if during this financial year you had a similar transaction that was common good, it was sold from common good, but then came back into council ownership, for example, that would potentially be something we'd pick up as part of our wider scope reporting and value for money, as being a transaction in year that would have an auditor interest from the wider scope. So not necessarily within the financial statement audit, but potentially within that wider scope reporting. So if there was a future transaction like that, then I think as an auditor we would be interested just in the nature of that transaction and the value for money and the decision making around that transaction for the council. That's where you would see that in our annual report, would be within that wider scope reporting.
Okay, thank you. Grateful to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that. Councillor John Young, you're next, John.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ian. I'm just looking at the valuation of property, plant and equipment, and with so many council buildings now lying unused, the Abercrombie office depot, for instance, is virtually empty now due to retirements and some centralisation. Is the value of council property the same whether the property is redundant to the council or fully utilised by the council? And could you explain how the valuations are? I know there'll be a standard method of valuing property, but could you briefly describe that? Thank you.
I can pick up on some of that, but I'm obviously not a RICS valuer. So in terms of the actual valuations, they are done in accordance with RICS and in accordance with the RICS manual. There's very specific guidance in there for valuers which take into account the nature of the property, whether it's a specialised property or it's an operational property or it's a surplus property, and therefore on what basis would the valuation be undertaken. And then they look at obviously things like indices and market rates and disposals and valuations within that, and that's defined by RICS. And within our external auditor approach, we always look at the qualifications of the valuer and the background of the valuer to satisfy ourselves that they're an appropriate valuer to value the council's assets. Alongside that, you've got the Accounting Code of Practice, which sets out within that certain criteria on how they would expect local government assets to be valued, what would constitute specialised operational assets, and a basis of valuation, ensuring that all assets are valued at least once every 5 years, and it does adopt a rolling valuation programme. For us, we're then just interested in the basis of the valuation, particular changes in valuation. For properties that are not valued in year, how do the council officers get assurance that they're not materially misstated? And particularly picking up on your point, if there's any particular areas of impairment or disposals, how do we test those are appropriately put through within the financial statements themselves? But in terms of the context of the valuation, that's something that's probably more appropriate to ask the council's valuers.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer, much appreciated.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Joe. Thanks again. I'll just double check. I checked a minute ago, there was nobody else looking to get in, but there may well be. Katie, Councillor Katie Hagman, you're next, Katie.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to note, obviously, that and you said at the start that we're in year 4 of 5, or was it 5 of 6? I'm not quite sure. But it's just to really confirm that when we go to reallocate the contract for this, that we will go through the full procurement processes, because obviously there has been an awful lot of work done in this last year. So just really to ask, when will that sort of start? Do we, how long does it take in order to appoint our external auditor? So that was sort of my first question. But the other point was more for yourself, Chair. Obviously you made comments on issues of fraud, and that you've made that previously within full council, and all of us here are charged with audit risk and scrutiny of D&G Council. So I'm just, as a member of that committee, I'm just wondering what's the stages, because obviously you've made reference to evidence that you've received. I've not received any of that evidence, but yet I am also a member of D&G Council, and I want to ensure that if there is evidence being presented, that it's presented to all elected members. So what is the procedure on investigation or investigating any of these issues that obviously have been highlighted to yourself? So as a fairly new member to this committee, what's my role in terms of these claims? Because obviously they've been said in the public meeting, and I want to ensure that if there is evidence being presented, how can I ensure that that's properly investigated? So it's not really in relation to this report as such, but obviously it's on the back of the comments that you've made yourself, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kate. I suppose I'll answer my perspective. I'll ask Vlad to come in as well, and then the other point maybe Joe you could come back to. So, Kate, from my perspective, I've received information, as I said, on a number public domains, now including this morning as well, as you've already commented on, so that you'll be aware as a member of the council, you are your own data controller. The council has no control over that. So that information has been put to me, both as a local member and as the chair of the Audit Report Scrutiny Committee. So I'll use that information, I'll disclose it to the people I feel is appropriate. I've had discussions at the highest level, including a small conversation with in particular the deputy leader, but I suppose and the leader as well, and I'll update them at that point when I feel it's the appropriate time. The police are obviously involved in this as well. So without going too far into the depth of where this is, and where it's sitting, the information that's it's certainly something I wouldn't disclose in this type of meeting. It's a public meeting, but there's ongoing investigations, which I suppose through the process, and that's where you come in, Vlad, at what point, depending on the outcome, the information, what investigations are undertaken, because it would apply to any investigation which happens within the council, whether it's through employment, whether it's criminal investigations. This stuff does get reported to members at some point, and that's probably for yourself to outline more so, Vlad, so I'll pass that over to you. But just to reiterate, We are own data controllers. We receive information on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. It's up to us what we do with that as a member of the council. Katie, you will be aware of that being a member of the council. I know you're well informed in regards to the process, how we deal with stuff. So, but Vlad, you might have something to add.
Yeah, just in terms of the process where there's allegations of criminality, whatever that may be, and the right process is for that to be reported to the police and for the police to investigate that first and foremost. Any particular internal investigations that may take place have got that sub judice to the criminal proceedings, which includes first and foremost the investigation, thereafter a referral to the Procurator Fiscal if there's evidence of fraud, and thereafter a potential criminal trial. So what we wouldn't want to do in any shape or form is tamper with that evidence or be seen to be treading the toes of those that are investigating it from the police angle. However, what we want to be seen to be doing absolutely is to be open and transparent in terms of that particular police investigation, provide any evidence that we may hold, and facilitate the police investigations. So that's where we should be at in terms of that referral to the police, and thereafter internal proceedings may take place. If depending on where that particular police investigation leads us, if there's no further action, we can still investigate it internally, and we may take our own action internally. We may do so in parallel with the police, but that would need to be a very close working discussion that we would need to have, because as I mentioned before, we wouldn't want to be seen to be in any shape or form contaminating any evidence that the police may want to get their hands on. Hopefully that answers the question that's been raised.
Does for me, Vlad. But Katie, just reassurance for yourself. You content with that? And we'll go to the second part of your question.
Yeah, no, I mean that's useful to know. I guess at some point it might be useful to have one of our internal audit papers on how do we investigate fraud, because obviously if these issues are raised, as an elected member, it is important that I feel confident in how the process goes forward. But no, thank you. It's just useful to have these. I think it's important to have these conversations in an open manner on public record, that, you know, if elected members are being highlighted potential risks to the council, that we are acting on them, because the last thing we want is to be in a situation where potential issues are raised and we're not seen to be actually taking those seriously. So no, thank you.
No, thank you, Kate. I think it's really important that you've raised that, and I think it's right that all members are kept up to date, but it is about being at the right time. I've raised some of these for a number of years now, but that'll become apparent through the report, I would imagine, whether it's in private or public, to the council at some point in the future. But there was a second part to that question, Joe.
Yeah, just to then pick up the point around procurement of external auditors. That's done by Audit Scotland through the Accounts Commission on behalf of the council. They appoint auditors across all local government bodies. It's a tender process that Audit Scotland themselves run, and that tender process we're expecting will be late August this year. So I think by February next year, the council will be in a position to know who the external auditors are for the council going forward. And within that timeline, there's a transition arrangement in place where there's a proper handover between the external auditors. So it's not something that the council run, it's run by Audit Scotland and the Accounts Commission. And the Accounts Commission then liaises with you just to confirm that you're comfortable with the choice of external auditor, and then they let you know the outcome of the process.
Thanks, Joe. Are you okay with that, Katie, before we move on?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, thanks, Katie. So I'm just checking, Tracy, if you don't mind, it looks to me like Katie was the last person wanting to speak. Would you confirm that?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Thank you, thanks very much, Tracy. So I think, as far as the recommendation is concerned, we've been asked to review and comment on the external audit plan. I think we've certainly done that. Anything else for yourself, Joe or Claire, that you'd like to add before we finish up? No, shaking our heads. Okay, no further members. Thanks very much for your time this morning. Much appreciated, Joe, and we'll be in touch and we'll catch up. Thank you. Thanks both.
Thank you.
Cheers. Item number 5, I think we've got now. I'll keep this across. Which is internal audit reports issued report is by the Head of Government Assurance, and from what I can see, Richard Fox is here today to talk to these. So I wonder, Richard, do you want to speak to these? Anything you want to add, or even you can go through them if you want. It's up to you. I mean, we're being asked to note and comment on the finalised internal audit reports as appended. So, Richard, we can go through each one. We'll let you speak first, see if you've got any comments, and we'll come back to members after that.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that this is a new format for yourselves, which we hope is clearer. We would welcome your views during this meeting as to what you think of our new audit reports. We've given you 2 audits to look at. They're both very stable systems, which were last looked at 3 years ago. The first is on housing benefit and council tax reduction. Then we have a report on council tax. I'm happy to take any questions on the reports that you have.
Thanks very much, Richard. Cheers. Thank you. I've maybe got some points, but rather than duplicate, I'll see if other members want to come in at any point. Give them a wee second. Let's open this up. So, the first person to speak is, it looks like Councillor Katie Hagman, is that right? Or is it Malcolm? I'm going to just, Councillor, I think it's you first, Katie. And Malcolm.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I know in terms of our delegation to this committee, we are scrutinising the performance in relation to policy and objectives and the priorities. And one of our priorities within Dumfries and Galloway Council is to look after the most vulnerable and ensure that we're an inclusive council. So my question is not, and it is in relation to the Appendix 1, and that is the housing benefit and the council tax reduction. Did you look at how our communication to constituents is received and understood? And the rationale that I'm sort of basing this on is when I was in effect in receipt of housing benefit, our statements that we put out to the public are exceedingly confusing. Now, I've not always stayed in Dumfries and Galloway, and I've come from other local authority area, which had a very simple, clear to understand statement. So did you look at how we're communicating with the public? Because obviously there's a lot of information here in terms of the processes, and that's only right that we're looking at the processes, but did you look at how the communication of that is? Because if there's overpayment or underpayment, how is that communicated to the public? Because, as I say, I remember quite vividly being in a situation where I wasn't working, then I was working, and I consider myself to be reasonably intelligent. I consider myself to be quite good with numbers. I had no ability to understand what the daily rates were, and it was really, really baffling. And has that been looked at? Because, ultimately the end figures may be correct, but how is that explained to individuals within the community who are applying and, needing that financial support at this point in time?
Thank you, Chair. The answer is we haven't formally looked at this. We're aware that revenue staff will assist claimants in order to complete a claim, but we've not actually looked at the formal communications, the correspondence, and how we publicise the availability of housing benefit. Thank you.
Any comments, Katie? You might have a comment in regards to that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, certainly, my thoughts would be we should be looking at how that's communicated, and and maybe perhaps even looking at examples of statements, so members can see how the information is communicated to constituents. Because, as I say, in the previous local authority, which I had experience with, there was always a daily charge rate. It was really clear what you were due for the year, how much had been paid. So therefore, if there was an overpayment or an underpayment, it was really clear on your statement. That, in my opinion, is missing from Dumfries and Galloway's statements. So I don't know whether that would be a piece of further work that we could look at in the future to, maybe do a review of these statements. Because if members of the public know that they're being overpaid, then they will contact the council to let you know, because nobody wants to be, incurring debt as they go forward. So, that would be my plea if that's a possibility, Chair.
Thanks, Kate. That sounds very reasonable. Richard, what's your thoughts?
I agree, it's very reasonable. It's something I'll discuss with Kevin to see how we can build it into next year's audit plan.
Okay, Thank you much for that, Richard. Katie, hopefully you'll be happy with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kate. So we'll pick that up later on at some point in regards to when that comes back, how we see that, so on and so forth. But it will be in hopefully next year's our audit plan. Malcolm Johnston, Councillor Malcolm Johnston. Malcolm.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, there's a couple of wee points on page 17, Appendix 1. It would be good practice for the criteria for discretionary benefits to be agreed by members. As there should there not maybe be a recommendation to that point that we actually review that after this audit going forward, so that the discretionary criteria are clearly highlighted. And the other one was the reconciliation of the payment runs, which was supposed to be done monthly. And the issue here is, for me, is it wasn't done because the responsible officer was unavailable. And again, I'm becoming increasingly concerned sometimes looking through some of these reports that what we have is we have a number of tasks where basically only seems to be one person that's capable of doing it. And that to me is beginning to look like a bit of a risk for the council. And I think we maybe need to have discussions. I'm sure Mike Shepley mentioned it in one of the last meetings about looking at this very issue when we were discussing the situation with the returning officer. And hopefully I'd like to see a report coming back on that basis, whether it's even an internal audit report looking at that sort of situation. Now we went on to Appendix 2, the next one, and there's a couple of wee bits in that where you mentioned that documents and reports weren't provided and you're going to come back 6 months later. Richard, do you feel like you're getting the support you require sometimes with some of these audits?
Can I just run through those in the order which they were presented with, if I may? In terms of the use of discretionary grants, I think that's very appropriate for this committee to call in when it decides that members should be more involved in these things. That's certainly the view of internal audit and the way it's phrased. This was additional COVID money, which when the criteria originally drafted were unduly restrictive and resulted in just 2 applicants. The criteria then widened and weren't necessarily consistent. And I think for members to get involved and actually say how they think the COVID money should have been used would have been beneficial. Moving on to the reconciliation, yes, that's obviously a concern. There should always be someone else in the background to be able to pick up. If only that there should always be adequate review of somebody looking at it, and the person reviewing should be able to do the job themselves. And as regards moving on to the council tax report, unfortunately at that particular time, the workload of the department was such that they weren't able to give us the resources we required, and that is disappointing, but we will bring a further report on council tax back to this committee in 6 months' time. I hope that helps.
Malcolm, you want to come back? Just to make sure you're okay with that.
Richard, you've covered that well. And I understand we've been going through difficult times as well. You know, you do have to be realistic. But as long as you feel happy, you're getting the support you require, then I'm happy.
Thank you. Oh, good. Councillor Maitland. Jane, you're next then. It's Councillor John Campbell after that. Jane.
Thank you, Chairman. I really wanted to come in to support Councillor Hagman's thoughts on this, because I suspect probably this is such an important issue with respect to vulnerable people, Chairman, that I think we should perhaps poke around a bit more, or at least recommend to communities that they poke around a bit more in it. What the audit doesn't tell us is also give us any sort of indication about comparator authorities. You know, how are they getting on? And I think it might be quite useful when we are looking at these things to have an idea about how we sit in relation to other authorities. There's a lot of money involved, and I think perhaps we should consider how we can, I think, probably not get into this particular position, and ask communities to think about it, given the conclusions that have been arrived at here.
Thanks, Jane. Richard?
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if you could just clarify the point on that particular one in terms of the position we're in. I'm not quite sure what I'm answering. Sorry.
Really, what has been suggested is that people get into arrears, Richard. It's the arrears issue, and the debt and the recovery. That's the bit that I'm interested in. And I would like to know, I think, about how we sit again in relation to our comparator authorities. I think that's something that we should be perhaps saying to communities, that we don't know that at the moment. And I think it would be helpful to know. I accept it's leading on from what you're telling us at this point here.
There is actually a comparative report which wasn't for publication nationally, which has been used internally by the council to give us an idea. I'm not sure how much detail I should go into a non-public report on the comparison side, but we are aware of what other councils are doing in terms of the debt. I do agree that it's an unfortunate position whereby we do have debts which do have to be recovered over 10 years. And as noted in the report, we do recognise that the council has priorities in terms of anti-poverty restrictions, and it isn't necessarily a good thing to be seeking to recover debts at the maximum level from some of the most vulnerable people in our society, because we also recognise that to recover housing benefit can also lead to rent arrears and potentially homelessness. So there is a balance to be struck with recovery of debt. Thank you.
Thanks. It looks, Kevin, you want to come in on the same point? Kevin Garrity.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for the benefit of the committee. I was speaking about this general area with the manager involved, and there is an intention to put a report to Community Committee in June. It's part of a sort of regular cycle of update reporting that's gone. So I think some of the points from this discussion can very usefully be communicated to see if we can influence the report that goes forward and the content of that report. So that sort of meets the target of keeping members appropriately informed and so on. The council's particular circumstances as well are different from many local authorities in that we don't have a housing stock. And as the officer pointed out to me, it's difficult. The comparison between local authorities is made more difficult because you've got to do it on a comparable basis. So the fact that we haven't got a housing revenue account in which to park the problem, so to speak, it makes a difference to what we're doing. But they were of the view that generally speaking, we had a good profile on housing benefit overpayments and recoveries. Nobody in their right mind would wish to protract a situation, I think, where people who are vulnerable in difficult circumstances, and that is why they receive housing benefit in support of their accommodation and tenancies and so on. Nobody wants to get those numbers wrong. Because the consequences, can sometimes regrettably exacerbate a difficult situation for people. So, but there are also people who fail to give us the information that's necessary to update records and to calculate things correctly. So the overall objective, I think pretty well 100% is, can we get this right first time, please? And that's very much the focus of the service and very much how resources are put into the cycle of sort of awarding and payment of housing benefits. Is as far as possible to get it right first time, and that's important. And I'm persuaded that the service is committed to this, a positive disposition on this area. But I'm very happy to take some of the components that have been said here to the officer, and hopefully we can influence that report that will go forward in June, at least as the starting point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll come back to you at the very end just to make further comments to make sure that it's what you're saying there is captured in the right way as far as the minute's concerned, and how we see that action going forward through yourself as well, obviously, Richard. You're leading here today. So we've got Councillor, I think it's John Campbell, then Stephen Thompson. John, it's over to you next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Mine's is probably not so much a question, but more of a comment. I'm looking at page 22 and the control areas around the council tax, the reduction, discount, exemptions, etc. I'm quite pleased to see that discretion was applied during the COVID-19 lockdown. I had a particular constituent get in touch with me who was concerned that he couldn't get to his property, because of the state of repair, to make the repairs, and it lay empty for a while. So there was a bit of discretion. I'm just wondering, was it my intervention that sort of prompted that? I know you have to look at each one in their own merits, but I'm pleased to see that discretion is being applied. That's probably the point I'm trying to make, Chair.
If I can come back to you, my understanding is this issue was discussed at a national level between local councils, and certainly your constituent was not the only one to receive this level of discretion. There was a fair number. I think the total amount of discretion that was awarded was about £40,000 overall.
Yeah, but I'm certainly pleased to see that discretion was applied. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Richard. I'm sure we'll discuss it at the COVID-19 committee as well, if I remember correctly. Councillor Stephen Thompson. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so a couple of things have been picked up. It was just, one's a housekeeping thing, and I know you'll come to that at the end, just in terms of recommendations, because I know a number of comments have been picked up. There's a report going to communities. I'd certainly like it to be maybe firmer in our recommendations or minute, if you like, that that kind of clarity around members' input into criteria for discretionary housing payment, for example, is maybe more articulated. And just on Councillor Hagman's point about a potential area for further exploration, about the communication of this to the member, where the wheels touch the ground, if you like. So their internal processes are getting looked at, but how we then communicate that to constituents in the letter that goes out, and how that maybe compares with other authorities. I don't know if that's even possible to do, but I think there is something about that, because there's a number of times for different letters that get sent to people where it's maybe not always clear in the letter what any constituent is meant to read from it. So I don't know if there's a readability forum or something like that. I don't know how that would work, but I think there's definitely something about how we communicate, whether it's press, comms, or letters getting sent from offices and departments, which might be quite correct in one sense, but not readable or meaningful in another sense. So I don't know how we would explore that, but obviously we want to be a readable, accessible, inclusive council. So how we communicate is important. And I know it was sort of out with the scope of this particular investigation, so I accept that. But that would be my comments, Chair. It's just not clear what our recommendations are, because I noticed that there are management responses and conclusions, but in terms of recommendations, I think we could do to firm that up, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Stephen. I think it's important that we do. So maybe I've got a suggestion. Maybe it's whether we can apply that or not. So previously, at a previous committee, we've seen the draft. It was Trunk Roads, I think, if I remember correctly. I just wonder, because all we've been asked is to note and comment on the finalised internal audit reports, which will have obviously been a lot of comments made, starting with yourself, Katie, and a lot of people have then reiterated their support for that. So I wonder if a way forward would be to potentially see how the draft minute, we see the draft minute, how it's worded, then individual members could make comment in regards to that before it comes back to the June committee for final ratification. That way we understand what our decision is at that point, because through the minute that is our actual decision. But Richard, maybe you've got comments in regards to that. Are you comfortable? And also maybe Tracy as well, Tracy Sonko. Is that a good suggestion? Is what I'm thinking, and that's probably up to members as well. But could we capture in that way, or has anybody else got any other particular suggestions? But I know looking at the appendix on the minute as we have today, and we've already agreed that that's well documented in regards to that, as well captured. And this might be another way of doing that. Similar way to capture that rather than do ad hoc just right now. Vlad?
Yeah, maybe also potentially bring Kevin in terms of his thoughts. Obviously, what's been recommended is for members to note and comment on the finalised internal audit reports, and that the comments have been made now, and potentially might be more. So what we can try and do, as you're proposing, is to capture those within the minutes as best we can. And reflect that within the final minute, and then thereafter, obviously the normal process, as I understand, is not normally for it to go back to members in that draft form, but I acknowledge the request, and I've got no particular issue with that, but I'll seek Tracy's views and also Kevin's in case they've got particular views. Tracy, anything from your perspective in terms of capturing that within the minutes?
Yeah, thanks, Vlad. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, we can certainly draft up all the comments that members have made and circulate that along with the draft minute and have that finalised prior to publishing the minute. And we can get that done within the next couple of weeks.
Certainly, it's a process what we used previously on the Trunk Roads, and it worked well, and it was shared with the Chair and Vice Chair in particular. Then we shared it further with members after that, and it worked well because it was quite clear, it was quite concise, and I felt it was quite appropriate actually, and because of the level of discussion, in particular the people who made comment in regards to this, how their views have been captured, because ultimately there'll be some action points in regards to this going forward, and it's difficult to try and capture everybody there, and then with a notepad pen, you get a chance to listen back to the audio recording, capture it fully, is what I'm thinking, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, that's fine. We can circulate that prior to publishing the minute. That's fine.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Tracy. Glad. Members content with that? So in real terms, we're noting and commenting on the finalised internal audit reports. And
sorry, Chair, I think Councillor Thompson wants to come back in, I think.
Oh, thanks, Tracy. Stephen, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, I appreciate we'll record. And I do welcome the fact that there's a level of detail in the that has been recorded. I think what I'm sort of getting to is, and I know the roads review was, of great interest to a lot of people, and therefore the focus and attention paid to it was over and above what you might expect from other things, and that's quite understandable. I think what I'm trying to get to is, well, if we as a committee recommend or agree to, say, for example, include that in a future audit activity, how do we capture and track that? And I think it comes to, it might be, noted in a minute, but I don't know if it's, I suppose it's about, the action tracker that we used to have in eGenda, I think it was. Obviously, we're on Modern Gov now. I'm not clear how to revisit things in Modern Gov to see how we've tracked actions through the various committees and part. I take assurance that we will do, but it's just, can we demonstrate that? So I suppose it's kind of tied to that a little bit. And I'm just sort of wondering, do we need to actually make a recommendation that we will, for example, add to a future audit plan that we will look at the council communications, for example, or, or do we just sort of talk about it, listen back to the recording, and then it's hard to, so does it get lost in the ether? That's what I'm worried about. That's my point, Chair. Thank you.
No, I understand fully, Stephen. So I think for me, there's 2 points. It's the actual outcome of the decision today, what we're actually making. But how do we then track that thereafter, that actual decision? That's the reason I made that suggestion. But Kevin's wanting, so he's maybe got to add value, I think. And yourself after that, Tracy, if you'd like to come in. I think Kevin's wanting in there.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to clarify the position, my understanding is, so what we have is an audit report before you, which is a report of our work and outcomes with recommendations, and we're asking you to note that and to be satisfied that the audit work was adequate, appropriate, and so on. In 6 months' time, you'll get a follow-up report, which will be a statement of how the service has responded. Included in that would be, I write the summaries of the reports for that point. It's the next agenda item. You see the style in a few minutes. But basically, I would seek to include in that follow-up report the key components of this discussion. So in summarising the report, I'd say this is what we said, and then when the committee discussed it, this is the view that was taken then. So effectively, that's how it's followed up. You should get part of that as the follow-up. In the meantime, what I'm interpreting the discussion is that you're asking as a committee not to change our recommendations and hopefully to accept those, but that for further consideration to be given to aspects of communication with clients. And that can be done in a number of ways. The first thing I'd seek to do is have a discussion with the manager involved in that, because certainly I know historically this has been an area of focus and emphasis, but it could be something that maybe needs to be revisited. If you like, if there's not much happening there, then I could consider including it as an audit. And the scope of that audit would be to consider the context of communications with clients and constituents in the context of what other local authorities do, in particular about communicating the basis for housing benefit awards. So it could be done as an audit, or it could be dealt with by the service. For instance, it might be a bit soon to get it through the June report if they're not already advanced in this discussion. But certainly I can be discussing with the service what they would like to do, if you like, as the first call. So either way, whatever happens will get reported back to the committee in 6 months' time as part of the follow-up work that's done. I think we should give them an option to look at it and to consider their position. They may be very confident that we do that communication correctly. And so, for instance, the outcome might be a briefing session or a workshop for members. So there are lots of sort of options to follow. The key outcome, as I say, really is to be satisfied and to be assured, this committee to be assured that our communications with clients are of a good standard and, as far as possible, assist with the avoidance of housing benefit overpayment debt accumulating. That's a key target for everybody in that. So, as I say, if it's possible to record the decision as being the committee wanting further consideration being given to this issue, then I will take that forward. In terms of Stephen Thompson's question, the way it works is with Modern Gov, we do have a decision tracker system in place. It's not in for all committees, but it will be ready. I think for the autumn, all committees will be using a decision tracker. But of course, that requires the committee to have made a formal decision. We also have a subset below that called operational actions, and these are for officers to take forward. And I'm quite sure that Tracy will confirm that components of this discussion will appear as operational actions. In other words, I'll be tagged to take forward this conversation or this discussion with the service that's involved. So I'm not sure if members see operational actions or not, but they are there and they are available for us to track that. So in terms of assuring the committee about following up on actions and both decisions and, shall we say, actions, the system allows both of those to take place, and you can be confident that this work will be followed up and will be reported back in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Stephen, back to you first.
Well, I was just about to. There, I've gone and done it. I've just hit return, but basically, no thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that, and obviously, I look forward to seeing that development at Modern Gov, because I think what you've set out there is totally reasonable and sort of articulates better what I was trying to get at, and in a way that can be taken forward as well, which is important. So thanks, Kevin, for that.
It's been a while, but I have seen that operational action list as well in the past. But it's been a number of years since I've been involved at that level. Fair enough. So I think Councillor Jane Maitland, I think you're wanting in, Jane, what I can see.
Sorry, thank you, Ian. What Kevin wants us to ask to talk about is whether or not the format and the comments and the reports and the rest of it. And he's not going to want to hear me say this, but actually I find them quite difficult to go from, for example, the control framework. And I'm looking on page appendix 2, paragraph 2, which is the control framework, and then there are bullet points. And just for the layperson, I think it's quite difficult to kind of read across the control framework and then go into the table that you've got there, Kevin. I don't know if any other felt the same thing, but it just wasn't the easiest thing to deal with. And that just might be me. The other very small administrative point, Ian, is that in the background papers, the links on Modern Gov are not live. They are in item 6, they're not an item in this one that we're looking at. And again, if you just want very quickly to look back at what was discussed and dealt with previously, it's quite awkward. So I just leave you with those comments.
No, I was got to ask that paragraph 3.6 you're reflecting to in particular. I always got to come to that point. So, Kevin or Richard, whoever's actually wanting to speak in regards to this one, I think there's some valid comments there, but I probably need some kind of feedback for Jane in regards to the way forward.
Thank you, Chair. If I may speak on this. So apologies to the committee that those links in the covering paper aren't live. They don't work. That's, I'm sorry, an oversight on our part. It's obviously important for members to be able to break out, so to speak, back to the original report if you wish to do so, sort of things. So that's kind of quite difficult. Apologies for that. But we'll make sure that's corrected for next time. In terms of the format, yes, we're the purpose, slight musings on my part, so please forgive me. What we're seeking to do is to provide clearer audit messages linked to specific aspects. So if you like, it should be clear about what work we've done, and it should be clearer what our findings are, and it should be clearer when we're making a recommendation. The narrative style previously took some writing. We've picked up comments from members that sometimes our writing has been too nuanced, and some of those reports can run to 12, 14, 15 pages in order to convey the information. So we've struggled quite hard, I have to say, to try and compress this down and hopefully make it more accessible. I do take the points that Councillor Maitland is making, is that the read across can be difficult. We sort of had internal discussions around whether we should have more line breaks, delineation, these sorts of things. So we can do that. I know that generally speaking, members in the past have commented that they're not enthusiastic about a landscape type format. Again, this was kind of a struggle to get all the information in. We would have to, if one looks at the next report, where we haven't done a landscape type approach, we've done a boxed approach. I don't know if that's more readable and would be easier to follow. So that's a prospect that we could try and realign these reports rather than reading landscape and therefore requiring a read through. We sort of box it a bit better. But as I say, the key thing really is I hope this achieves certain objectives, which is to be more concise, to be clear about the work that we did and the key issues that we're reporting on, without a sort of lot of ramblings and musings by internal audit around aspects. And, from those points of view, I hope we've succeeded. I'm sorry if the format does not lend itself to easy read, but I'll welcome members' comments in this regard. And it's something for us to seriously look at and try and improve upon with the next set of reports that we produce. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Jane, have you got any comments? Just to reflect back on what Kevin said.
I think that's all perfectly fair. I think it's largely personal, Ian. I think some people just instantly can read across and it's easy, and other people find it more difficult. I personally prefer the format of the next reports, but that's just me.
Missed the end of that there, Jane, but we've got that. The crux of it, we're looking at the next report, and I suppose we could pick up on that on a conversation with Kevin, and that feedback could be incorporated, Kevin, if that's okay. In the future, Councillor Katie Hagman, what you say next, Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have to admit I agree with Councillor Maitland's points there. I too struggle with the swapping between landscape and portrait, and I appreciate the need to make the reports more concise. However, looking at that, there is reference on the final column on findings and further action points, but in the conclusion, there's no list of there's 2 paragraphs, but they're not pulled out as key action points. And actually, previously, we always had a bullet point list of these are the specific action points. And while they're now within a narrative within a table, so we still have that narrative going on with this report, but it's on the table format. So I think there is further work to be done in the formatting of these reports, and obviously, that it evolves like everything else. But I too would look forward to refining these a bit further, because I too, but I appreciate that could well be just my personal preferences. My question really was in terms, again, it's more about the sort of governance, because the forward plan for the council was published or updated, and all members updated on Friday. There's only one report for audit risk and scrutiny in September. So, I think it's really important that we keep our forward plans up to date, because at the moment, the only report we're getting in September will be the external audit of D&G Council. So my plea is really, can we make sure that all our pages online, so members of the public can see, well, what is the reporting schedule? Because at the moment there's only one report coming to our next committee according to our own forward plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for that. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Vlad, that last point, and obviously we'll have further discussions in regards to both what yourself and Councillor Maitland have made at a later point in time. Vlad?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Kevin wants to come in first, and then I'll come in the back of that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the next committee is quite soon, on the 1st of June. It should indeed have the reports that are coming to it, some of which are standing reports, some of which are reports, cyclical reports, and relating to the FPT review and stuff like that. It's just nobody has given this, me not least, has given this their attention. So apologies to the committee that that's not been updated. That's remiss of us all, I think, in terms of defining the business for the committee. It's a bit scary that it's quite so soon, but that's something that we will endeavour to do, so that hopefully the next production of the forward plan, you begin to see the forward cycle and forward programme of work. But we will have things for you to look at, I can assure you. It shall be an interesting agenda. Apologies, Chair.
No, thank you. I would expect that, Kevin. It will be. Vlad?
Yeah, just in essence, my understanding is that there'll be a significant agenda, so there's quite a lot coming back. The issue is that we haven't reflected that in the forward plan, so apologies all round from our end. But hopefully moving forward, we'll get that tied up and take on board what Councillor Hagman has just said, and we'll make sure that we're reflecting on that more often.
Thank you, Vlad. Thanks very much. So I think we've took note and we've commented on the finalised internal audit reports. There's been a lot of notes being taken as well in regards to potential actions, further discussions. I'll just check to see if that is the final person. In case there's... Oh no, Councillor McKee. Jock, you wanting in?
Hi, thanks, Chair. I'm sorry, I'm coming back for a totally different angle for the previous speakers, the last two lasses. I thought the layout there was very helpful. It was explaining what you were, people were trying to do within the audit committee. I thought the explanations were very helpful, but if you can you want to do a different layout, we'll give it a chance. But I thought the layout was pretty good. Thank you.
No, thank you for that, Jock, because I was okay with it as well, and I thought, okay, further conversations will pick up on that. There might be a silent majority sitting actually in the background, but I think to see different examples, and I think 3.6 alludes to that, and how we work with them, but we'll have to come to some kind of majority consensus at some point in the future to what is the best way forward in regards to how these are reported. I'll just double check. You're the last person, Jock. Should have captured that. Oh no, Councillor John Campbell. John?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I kind of thought the report was pretty easy to follow when I'm reading across, and because of the columns, I can get my head around what's actually being said about the actions plans and things like that. Do you want to go to a vote, Chair? If you No. To be serious, I think even the following item, you know, I could read that report just as well and just as easy. I just thought I'd maybe put my comments in there. But either report would satisfy me. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, John. I kind of feel the same way, but I found it okay to read the same with the next report. I didn't have any problems with it, but we're kind of going through a kind of mix and match, see what best suits the committee, because comments have been made previously, but I prefer this to the previous stuff that we had, previous style even. But we'll come to a point, we'll not get any votes, that's not for today. We'll have further discussions, maybe in slightly different format, see what it's like, then we'll come back to either some kind of hybrid or we'll fixate on a particular type of style. So we've took note and we've commented on the finalised internal audit reports. Hopefully that's been well captured. I think we're content to move on to item number 6, unless I see any hands or notes otherwise. Screen back up and working again. Everyone's went dead in there. Okay, item number 6, which I've got to have copy follow-up. That's a follow-up of internal audit reports considered by the committee in September. Let me just see, sorry, better here. So it says that you're here to help with this one, Kevin, and speak to it. I don't know if you want to speak to it first, or we'll just go straight to potential questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to confirm, there were 4 reports reported back in September, so this is the 6 monthly follow-up on those. And we've got a good outcome, which I think can be significantly attributed to the Council's interest and requirement for follow-up reporting at 6 months. So that's commendable. I think it's good. I think that level of focus helps us achieve progress. We have officers here from services available to speak or answer any questions around the audit processes itself, any additional features or questions that member might wish to ask for. So they're all available online to discuss these reports. So it's very much up to be led by you, Chair, whether you want to take the reports one at a time or take them as a group. It's up to yourself. But overall, we're recommending closure of all 4 reports. 1 or 2 might have one action remaining, but that closure recommendation comes from our confidence based on the progress made to date by the service and our sort of confidence in their determination to conclude the action. So we don't fight it through to the bitter end. I'm not sure that's entirely productive. So I'm pleased to say we can recommend closure of these 4 reports if the committee is so minded, or indeed if you wish to do it differently, you would continue these reports to a future date for a further follow-up report on them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Very much appreciated it. Paragraph 2.1, it's asking us to note and comment on the progress made by management in addressing internal audit reports as detailed in appendices 1 to 4. So we'll go through one at a time. Appendix 1 is the central creditors, and Lindsay Wilson is here to answer any potential questions. So I'm going to cross and change over things, try and see who's looking in. I don't think anybody's voting in. I think I've maybe missed that one. Is anybody voting in this particular item? Last person I can see is Councillor David McKee. I think that was going back to the last one. Unless, Job, you want to...
No, it's for the grey mileage one, Chair, if you didn't mind.
Ideal spot on, Chair, want to speak, that's good. No, thank you. So, anybody want to speak to or ask Lindsay any questions in regards to the central creditors? We'll have to see that one in the past. Don't see any hands or anybody want to speak. Our capital budget in Appendix 2, Paul Garrett's here to speak to that. I think Paul's here. Stephen, was that the last one or is it this one? Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I was having a malfunction. But I think, yeah, it was actually on the page 33 under the current management update. And it was just the line where it says supporting documentation for interfacing from feeder systems to be fully retained and checks introduced to ensure compliance. Adopted and completed. Now, I'm just sort of wondering, does that mean there's a commitment there or it's been done? So it's just to get a sense of, has that been done, or are we accepting that the commitment to do that is sufficient?
Can I come in there, Chair, just to say it's actually been done?
Thanks,
it's actually it's one of these advantages of the way we've operated. Most of our staff working from home, we've had to sort of think different ways of doing things. So now rather than keeping sort of paper hard copies, what we're doing is taking sort of scans and electronically storing these. And the two senior officers in the billing, ordering and payments team reconcile these on a daily basis, and part of reconciliation requires that the electronic documents are there to undertake that reconciliation. So yes, it has actually been done.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thank you. You were content with that, Stephen, are you?
Yeah, no, I think when I was reading it, it was just going through it. Some things were agreed in full and will be implemented. Some things were to be adopted, that or something had not been completed. But thanks very much for that. So that's clear on that point.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks very much. Appendix 2 is capital budgeting. Any points on that? Could you sign that one off? Going to the distant past, we have Councillor Malcolm Johnston. Malcolm, is it on this one?
It was just a couple of wee points on the capital budgeting. It was, you know what I'm like. I don't like phrases like larger projects. Right, a wee bit of definition as to what that is. And here's another one. This is maybe going to fall into the Daft Larry question thing. Who's on the capital strategy group?
Thanks, Malcolm. 2 points there. And that is for you, Paul, if you're on the line, are you?
Yeah.
If no, good man, Paul. There you go.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, in terms of the reference to larger projects, we could have defined that maybe a bit clearer. It's been applied to everything that the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee treat as a priority capital project, but not fully within individual asset classes. Because there's a large number of projects there, and the requirements of the Treasury Green Book are obviously very extensive. So it hasn't been applied in full to those projects. However, there has been a lot done to improve general practice in terms of the preparation of scopes, about project estimating in terms of cost, timescale, and various other elements. So there has been improvements being made across the board, but in terms of that adoption of the Treasury Green Book standard, that has been specifically for priority projects at this stage. In terms of the capital strategy group, that's a group that's made up of senior officers of all council services, particularly the lead officers from each of the council's priority capital projects and lead officers from each of the individual asset classes. And that group has played a key role in recent months in terms of implementing a number of recommendations that members have made through the transformation process. It is obviously also heavily involved in the asset class review, which is currently going on, and which there's a member seminar on tomorrow morning, which I hope members can attend. So that's the nature of that group. As I say, it's senior officers within each of the services. It's chaired by myself at the moment as well to take these things forward.
Thanks for that, Paul. It's just I sometimes, think members should maybe get a wee bit more insight into some of these criteria that are being used, on a kind of regular basis. I'm not meaning to have a big, full-blown report on it, but it would be useful for that information to be made available.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. And as I say, we've got a member seminar tomorrow. So one of the kind of purposes of that seminar, one, it'll be to explain the kind of planned process for the review of capital and particularly the asset classes, but it really is also trying to get from members their kind of views on information that they would require, areas that they'd like to see developed as part of this as well. So happy to take those kind of comments and build on them through that review tomorrow, if that's helpful.
Sounds good. I think.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I'll take that as a make sure you're there if you're going to poke your nose at them.
It sounds like it. It looks like, I think we're on item number 3 now, appendix 3, which is grey mileage. We've got Gordon Bryce, speaking on that, and Councillor McKee. Jock, you what in this particular one?
Hi, thanks, Chair. I've been in the council for quite a few years now, and I think the sad thing is at the present time, you just don't know how things are going to roll out after this COVID carry on. And grey mileage is something that's been up for discussion for many years, and we didn't seem to be making much progress with it. I did notice that the council had purchased some electric cars, which is a good way forward. But I think very often, I know when you were looking for cars to go on site visits and things like that, you had difficulty getting them. So I would hope that we really do a good review of what's required. And as I say, they're going to be difficult on the return to work, whether people are still going to work from home or whether they're all coming into the office, and what travelling they're going to have to do and all that sort of thing. And I think it's important that we indicate to staff as well as members that there's pool cars there that should be used in the first instance. If you can't get one, then that should be noted, and any comeback can be addressed. But I think we need to address this problem properly, and I'd like to know just how we see it going forward.
Gordon, I think that's for you to make comment on, I think.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. So a couple of good points there for the councillor. The first one on I'd like to make on grey mileage is previously and historically we've always dealt with it after the horse is bolted, if you like, and we've just been dealing with information once claims have been through and claimed off the back of the sort of expenses in the finance system. Moving forward, well, the system that is now designed and tested and ready to go live will deal with that up front. So any grey mileage claims from staff will have to be pre-authorised, and part of that pre-authorisation it scrutinises that journey in exactly the way that the councillor mentioned. So it will be scrutinised in a way as do we have to make that journey? Have you tried to book a pool car? Are there dedicated vehicles within your fleet? And so on. So it'll ask those types of questions before any pre-authorisation is given for the grey mileage. And alongside that pre-authorisation, basically you'll gain a code which will enable you to claim any authorised mileage. So it makes it far more controllable from a management point of view, and I think that alone will significantly reduce claims.
Thanks very much for that. I think that's a big step forward. It's long overdue, but thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that, Joe. Thank you. Gordon? I don't think I've got anybody else for what I can see, unless Jane, was it on the same point? I got Jane Maitland next. Was it on the same? Was it Appendix 4?
It is on the grey mileage, Chairman. No, that's reassuring. I agree that is a reassuring sound that we might even be able to kind of, predict what the grey mileage will be on the basis of challenge, really. And I think that's absolutely correct. I think that's what the public will expect. I was just looking at the line about climate and was wondering, Chairman, about that it simply says this is a mammoth task which has many work streams. And I mean, I think that's the understatement of the world, isn't it, of today. So should we poke around a bit more about that? It is going to come to service committees, I think. We see a bit more in service committees, but I think it's important that we maybe expand a bit on that very simple statement that it's a mammoth task, etc., etc. But there should be a separate update out with this particular subject area. I agree. How's that going to be taken forward?
What about you, Gordon?
Yeah, so I'll try and keep this as brief as I can. And I was trying to put that as simply as I can, that statement about climate. So there's a number of factors that we need to look at, and that's the declaration that the council's made in the climate emergency and the targets that are within that, in particular 2025 to be net zero within the region. The Scottish Government has targets for local authorities to reduce the amount of combustion engines on their fleet on cars and vans by 2025, and the heavier and bus fleet by 2030. But so you can imagine that the size of fleet that we have got, both owned and leased, the infrastructure alone that would run alongside that level of electric fleet, for example, is huge. It's out with the resource that we currently have within the department to sort of lay out that type of network, albeit we are doing it in small chunks at the moment. That's one thing. The other thing is the capital strategy. We've kind of touched on that. That capital strategy would need to align with climate change to allow us to make the purchases within the fleet, for example, to hit these targets and to carry on this route. So there's a bit of work just on those simple subjects, without going into the technology that's available, the technology we require within the region to make the simplest journeys and vehicles that might or might not have the range. So it is, when I say mammoth, it touches probably across all streams of the council in many different ways. We are working on a strategy to put in front of members as to how that might happen or progress. And that's where, I mean, it probably lies out with this particular committee and should probably go to service committee next. I hope that answers your questions or what you're looking for, Councillor Maitland. If no, I can try and elaborate on anything else that wasn't clear.
Yeah, Chairman, I fully understand it's really out with the remit of what we're looking at here, but it's something we've absolutely got to get a grip of. We've made declarations and we need to take this forward. So perhaps tomorrow might be some time that we should speak about it, the member seminar.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you. Councillor McKee, Jockey, you want to come back, I think?
Aye, sorry, Chair. And I'll apologise before I start because I'm not included in this situation. But what about the councillors who travel quite a distance for meetings in Dumfries and that sort of thing? What about consulting them and see what their view would be of using pool cars to travel from wherever they live up to Dumfries, or picking up a pool car close to where they live, rather than that would reduce the grey mileage quite considerably. It's not easy to say that as well, but I just like, as I say, it doesn't affect me because I stay in Dumfries, but it's something that I wonder if he'd consider at all.
I think, Councillor McKee, the first point that I would make here, and maybe Vlad might want to make comment on it, is councillors, albeit I think they're seen as employees of the council, they don't come under the same terms and conditions as a normal employee, and written within the standing orders or whatever it's called, as a section that allows you to claim mileage. However, I think I'm right in saying there's a separate piece of work being done at the moment with Liz and her team to speak to members, and I'm open to have these discussions with members to make council pool fleet more available, albeit it's no easy in every circumstance because where councillors and members live, but there's definitely options and solutions we can put in place to reduce the amount of members' mileage. I think that would be fair to say.
Give you the first chance, come back, Vlad, then Kevin's wanting in the same point.
If I could go back just before Vlad, sorry to interrupt, Vlad, but I think it'd certainly be worthwhile consulting with the councillors rather than just making a decision, a kind of ad hoc decision. Thanks, though.
Vlad, then Kevin, please.
Yeah, just for clarification, yeah, elected members are not employees of the council. However, I guess the request here is one of potentially having that kind of broader perspective in terms of that kind of pool car use and potentially whether members would be allowed to use that. I think, without having the capacity within my own delegated authority, but certainly I put that back to maybe Gordon and his team to maybe explore that option and maybe see there may be options to look at benchmarking and see what other local authorities are doing in that regard. And I don't see an issue with that in terms of any particular roles that elected members play, which may differ from an employee. But certainly that's a policy decision that would need to be taken at the very end of that, and that is for council to decide on that particular question as to whether they can use it and the entitlement to that. But I'll maybe just open it up in case Gordon wants to come back on anything.
Certainly, totally agree with you there, Vlad. It's worth it. It's worth the consideration.
Yeah, if I could just come back to you, please, just quickly. In my experience, and as far as I'm aware, members can absolutely use the pool fleet. I suppose my point was more along the line of following the policies that we're putting in place. We can't, unless members choose to, we can't force members to use the pool fleet the same as we can staff. I suppose I should have made that a wee bit clearer. Apologise about that, but no, absolutely, members can use the pool fleet and the council fleet. I think it's just more about working with the members to make it more sort of accessible.
It's as much about making them aware, but I mean, I think it's for some members they'll travel, and because you're based at home, that is your place. Class is your place of work. We're only employees for remuneration purposes. I think, as you're aware, Jock, you might have to travel 20 miles to get the pool car, to drive 3 miles to come back, to drive another 20 miles back home, and it's out of hours. You know, a lot of it's out of your regular, what you class as working days. So enables it keys, so on and so forth.
I appreciate that, Ian, and I quite agree with you. And it's where it's handy, where councillors can get them easily, that could try and encourage them to use it.
I think you're absolutely right. With Councillor Hagman, I think you're wanting in, because Kevin, it's probably been covered, but I'll let Councillor Hagman in. If you've got anything to add, Kevin, I'll bring you in then.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's on this point, and I think, you know, by all means, elected members should have the opportunity for pool cars. I know my colleague Councillor Surtees used them a lot when she could get them. However, it's just I would be loath to put down hard and fast rules on that one. I have 2 different community councils, of which I travel 54 miles to get to. They are evenings. They're out of hours. You know, they take 40 minutes to get to just in one direction. So to add another, say, 10 minutes, you know, each way, that is going to extend the time. And also the circumstances that many members, and I would hope in future more members will have, is some of us have children that maybe have to come along to those meetings. And I believe that there is issues that you wouldn't be able to take passengers in council pool cars. So for elected members, and I apologise profusely to my son who has had to come to community council meetings, it just simply isn't feasible for elected members to use the pool car system. So, you know, by all means, let's explore that. But, you know, it's a far more complex situation than just simply an employee who has set hours and set places of work. So I just wanted to put those issues down on record. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. I think it's appropriate you do. Kevin, have you got anything to add, or has it been covered, do you think?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I may, just briefly. So what's interesting about this audit and the discussion we're having is that this was a slightly wider scope audit, in the sense of it wasn't just about the mechanics of grey mileage. We did introduce the additional areas around climate emergency, which has introduced some useful discussion, and also around members travel, which sometimes might be regarded as a bit of a sort of, well, be careful about that one. So we did make a specific recommendation around members travel, which was relating to developing a strategy for elected members travel that obviously was not designed to impose or impinge upon rights or entitlements or personal needs or personal requirements, but we linked that to digital democracy. What's interesting, of course, is that with the COVID health emergency coming in, there's been a significant overall reduction in grey mileage. So historically, we were seeing reductions in grey mileage, but nevertheless, the members group of mileage was creeping up. It was not reducing, it was continuing to rise. So we saw our recommendations sat around, can we do something to assist members who will want to show leadership in this area through digital democracy? As it happens, digital democracy to some extent has arrived, and it's interesting to see what the reduction in grey mileage has been. So the reduction in grey mileage for the last financial year was roughly 75%, which is interesting. That's in total. And the members' reduction in grey mileage was somewhere in the region of 80% in a single year. So, if you like, it helps to illustrate what an extreme digital democracy approach might look like. Now, undoubtedly, as we have restoration, we start to have physical attendance at meetings and things, this will re-emerge. So the way the audit is dealing with this, and this recommendation is being dealt with in this audit, is effectively to say this is a project for the future. So we've got eyes on this. I think it will be very important to engage with members about their needs and requirements. Interestingly, based on Councillor Hagman's comment, the usual problem is a lack of availability of pool vehicles during office hours, and indeed encouraging use out of office hours because the fleet's still sitting there. So it's interesting that, in fact, members may be able to help us contribute to better use of the fleet in total by using pool cars, because the hours in which you're operating extend beyond regular office hours. So there's lots of interesting potentiality and scope here, but it is a project for the future, very much so. In effect, we've in our report, we're saying it's not been possible to progress that in the last 12 years, but it's happened anyway. But we mustn't lose sight of it overall. But it's we've got it, sort of thing. We've tagged it, and it will be managed, I think, both by Gordon's team and also by Vlad's team in terms of support to elected members. It's something that will come, and we'll need members' assistance with this very much. But as I say, there's been a significant change from a position of previously a steady growth in members' mileage to last year a significant reduction in that mileage taking place. And we'll probably want to arrive at somewhere halfway between the two positions in due course. Anyway, thank you, Chair. Apologies if I've exceeded my brief.
Thanks, Kevin. Appendix number 4. We've got Karen Bromley to speak to this. So this is the payments for the major festivals, events and the arts. I'm just looking for any members. If any members want to speak in regards to this one, again, we've been asked to see the end of this one too. Kevin, that's an old hand, but I see up with yours. Just there's nobody want to come in this. You've got needs time about today, I think. Karen, by the looks of it. So appendices 1 to 4. As we come back to recommendations and additions we've made, there's a lot of good discussion in regards to this. I don't know what to rush MD on, but we've got someone's got appointments at 12:30. Ultimately won't stifle debate, so we've been asked to note, comment the progress as per the appendices 1 to 4. I think we've certainly done that, and I think it sounds like there's certainly points being captured, but in regards to statements made, and we've got some assurances in regards to different parts. A question asked and assurance in different parts to all 4, apart from the appendix 4. That is, it seems to be straightforward. There wasn't a lot to discuss in that previously, I don't think. We've always been fairly confident and reassured around about that one. But if that's, we decide if any internal audit reports are to be re-included in the future for a future follow-up report to the committee. Has anybody got any particular ones they want to see coming back? Some to me like they didn't, but just in case they do. Oh, Stephen, is that you wanting in? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. It was actually just a very minor point on the the events one. And it was just about the SLAs and about that kind of traffic light system. Now, a number of the sort of events that we support, it's over a number of years, and that's kind of part of the deal sometimes. So it was just that at the point of inception, if you like, all the SLAs are in place and everything, but it's more about how that ties into how we review. You know, you can sort of pass the test to get the money, as it were, and then it's like, well, how do we make sure that stays good for the duration of the support that we provide over the years? You know, so I think maybe that's then down to monitoring by committee, etc. But it was really just a point on that, although I'm comfortable enough with it because I think I may be digging up things that don't need dug up. But that was more my only comment on that one. Thanks.
Karen, do you want to respond to that at all? Or?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just come back on that, Councillor Thompson. Yeah, just to confirm that officers continue to work very closely with organisations in terms of sort of major festivals and events. Now, generally, what happens if there is a service level agreement, an agreement with, let's say, a signature event, and it runs over 2 financial years, the service level agreement is still only put in place for 1 or 2 years at a time, and that is continually monitored. 1, by officers, but 2, it's reported back to Communities Committee as well.
That's fine, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to you both. So just apologies for not picking up. I'll just double check. I don't see anything in the chat box at all. Any hands raised? So we've noted and commented on 1 to 4. And we've been asked to decide any further internal audit. It sounds like we've not got any. Apologies, I'm being distracted by a number of other messages coming at the same time. Nope. Okay, item number 7. Presenting the Council's Local Code of Corporate Governance and Annual Governance Statement. So, I'll catch up on the electronic side. Nick, I see you're here to speak to this one. So, Nick, I wonder if you want to make any comments. Vlad, is it yourself? I see your screen on. It says Nick in here, so I maybe got that mistaken. Vlad, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just to say, yeah, Nick and myself are here for any particular questions. This is a summary of, first and foremost, the actions that have been taken in 2019-20, and thereafter some of the progress and development that's been carried out as we currently speak, which are summarised in paragraph 3.14 to 3.16.
Thank you. I'll open up to questions. Let's see if I've got any here. In a second, sorry about the dog. Looks like I've got you, Stephen, unless that's an old one.
No, thanks again, Chair. What it was, it's actually on page 43, the midpoint review, and this was for the climate change priority, and it's just, I suppose, prompted by part of the discussion in the previous item, just about, how do we build that into all aspects of the council, if you like. But obviously, we weren't really able to have a midpoint review, obviously for a number of reasons. But so where does that leave that action, now and obviously going forward? It was really just to get what happens next with that, basically.
Chair, through you. It's a good question, and as I've not been party to it, unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that, but I don't know if Liz is here, so maybe Liz might have a perspective on it.
Thank you. Yes, through yourself, Chair. As you'll recall, the midpoint review was agreed by full council in autumn last year, but clearly the second lockdown of COVID meant that the engagement programme was not able to be taken forward. So it's something that I think political group leaders in the first instance will want to consider about how you do that in the months remaining in this term of the administration. So it's not yet been concluded, which is why we've given you an interim position in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks, Vlad. Stephen, content with that, just to make sure?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what comes back to this committee to sort of conclude how that action was resolved, whether it's by political groups or otherwise. So we'll look out for that.
Thanks, Stephen. Earlier on the week, we're at Plan Committee. So I'll pick up this page 43. It's 3.13. Vlad just said, try to put into context what my thoughts were on about that. So it's ensure consistent process for early stage legal advice as appropriate. I have to admit, going back a number of years, you always used to have somebody legal around the table at every committee. There was always some kind of solicitor there at whatever level. It doesn't matter what committee it was, even the local area committees, there was somebody there. So we were being consulted by the Scottish Government. There was Scottish Power Energy Networks had a Section 37 application over in the west of the region. And so it was a legal process. So the committee decided to take a different view to the officer's recommendation, and didn't compromise the officers, but it's certainly put them on the back foot in as far as I felt a bit uncomfortable in regards to this. And listen, we've really took a different position. You should really be taking advice. It's what I felt for somebody else, because they took a position. We were obviously asking, a number of members in that committee were asking advice in regards to how they felt they wanted to object to the actual application coming forward, exactly what points, where it was most appropriate. And personally, I felt there used to always be a legal person there. I felt it maybe should have been a legal person, and that would have allowed I suppose I felt that some of the officers maybe could have been compromised in regards to giving us advice that actually they were against in the first place. I felt they were maybe a wee bit compromised. So, and as far as I just felt, is there a resource issue? Should we have legal people around the table? Is what I was thinking. At box 6 on the opposite page is page 44, because I don't see any of the hands up coming in, so I'll ask these questions. The members' outside bodies, that's been going for quite a while, and I know we've touched on it in regards to the scrutiny review, but I thought it was only a very, very small part, and I really need to see the end of this. It's been going for years in regards to this review of members' appointments outside bodies, what that means, bringing everything into order, because there's so many of them, I know. And at 3.17, it talks about it's acknowledged that the timetable for our committee decisions and the timescale for the annual accounts means that, again, for the final annual governance statement may need to be published separately and after the annual accounts. I just wondered, was there any risks attached to that? Was there any risks in particular attached to that? Because we seem to be, because of everyone being so busy, remote work and so on and so forth seems to be, come back to some comments what I made earlier, actually, how well resourced are we? And I did actually think, from a legal point of view, legal team, is that at their appropriate level? That's where I'm coming from there, Vlad, if you can answer that, please.
Yeah, first and foremost, in terms of the question of legal support at committees, particularly service committees, but also some of the quasi-judicial committees that you mentioned there that make those sort of both planning and licensing decisions. And my intention would be absolutely to review what we have in terms of capacity in order to provide legal support going forward to these committees. Ideally, and you've heard me mention this before, I want legal services to be involved in terms of early intervention, but ongoing support and advice through the decision-making process, and that absolutely includes the decision-making forums such as committees and council. So from my perspective, at this point in time, I would suggest that the legal services function does not have the capacity to provide that level of service. However, it's something that I want to build in, and absolutely that's part of the overall governance and assurance remit that falls within my portfolio, but also, more importantly, falls within both the FPT review and also the trunk roads review and actions that flow from that. Having that level of legal support through the decision-making process will undoubtedly help in terms of general legal governance. So hopefully that answers the first question. In regards to the other points that you raised in terms of the outside bodies, my understanding is we're putting a report forward for the full council in June, so hopefully that will put that conclusion that you're seeking. It is a big piece of work. I've been involved in it in other local authorities and certainly in the fire service in my time there, and it does take time to delve through the various bodies as well as what they do and how we best interact with them. In terms of the last point, I don't know if Liz maybe can help me out. I'll just bring Liz in at that point in terms of 3.7.
Thank you. Yes, members will be aware last year we did the first self-assessment against the local code of conduct, and we changed quite significantly the format of the annual governance statement. So last year there was quite a significant change that took place over the months, and therefore we did publish the annual governance statement, the final version, as a separate document after the annual accounts had been done. This year, because we've got that under our belt, so to speak, and we're not expecting there to be such significant change. So we would hope that between the draft annual accounts, which has got the draft annual governance statement in it, and the final version in September, that there will be fewer changes required this year. So in answer to your question, Chair, I think that the risk of that is certainly very small and has been reduced significantly, but it's certainly, we give the delegation to the Head of Governance and Assurance just to be able to make any final changes that are required, particularly by this committee, as the annual governance statement is finalised. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Another quick one. There's no hands up, so I'll just pick it and I'll leave it at this because I know time's moving on. Page 52, 3.5, and it's referred to in another different formats through here. Talks about the scheme of delegation to offices and statutory appointments as set out. I'm reading that as statutory. Is that correct, or should that be scheme of delegation to officers and responsibilities and statutory appointments? Because I think it's maybe in the next one. I just wanted to make sure that was right, because it's something we'll certainly will come back to. And the executive and non-executive at 3.5 at the very top of that, I wasn't just 100% sure, and I would been keen to understand exactly what that meant, those two defined roles.
Sorry, so if I could just pick up the first one, Chair. What should be is the scheme of delegation and responsibility to officers and statutory appointments. That should be the...
Right, okay, spot on. That's no problem. I thought that's probably what it was, and that'll come back at some point. 3.5 right at the top. 3.5, so in bold it says define and document the roles and responsibilities of the executive, non-executive, and it goes on. Just the executive and non-executive in particular. Just exactly who and what is that? So I'm sure, clear my own mind.
Yeah, in terms of the executive, that would be the officers. Non-executive, that would be elected members. That would be my take on that. And in terms of, in essence, that falls within the overall schemes of delegations that fall within both the committees, council, as well as members. So it's the kind of overall scheme of delegation, as mentioned in the first bullet point there.
Thank you. Okay. Still no hands up. So if that's the case, then certainly it's one we'll come back to later in the year. I did have a number of things in here. It's something I'm quite keen to come back to in June and speak further on then. So we're going to scrutinise the progress of the implementation of the 1920 actions as set out in paragraph 3.13. We've touched on them surely, and we're being asked to note the progress in the development of the 2021 code and statement as set out in paragraph 3.14 to 3.16. So again, we've touched on them as well. I'll just double check nobody else is wanting in. I thought it was going to get a lot of discussion on this one today. No did. Thanks, Stephen. Thank you very much. So item number 8. This is the one we've all been waiting for. It's I'll just move this on. In fact, I'll catch it here. It's quicker on the screen with this bit. So, Scrutiny review support to elected members, a report by the Head of Governance and Assurance. I see it's yourself that's leading this one, Liz, and thank you for the hard work you and your team, everybody's put into this. We still look to speak to Fraser. Hopefully 26th, they might have had his invite by now to a group. They might not, we're not sure, but that's for the 26th. There is coming Monday, we've got him scheduled in for in our diary as a group to discuss further. So I just wondered, my only point in this, I thought it was really, really good piece of work. Thoroughly enjoyed this. I think members have got a much better understanding now of what's happening across all councils. So Katie, you're wanting. I'll just ask Liz if Liz wants to add, or Vlad, whoever's leading. Well, it's yourself, Liz, according to the people that I've got. If you want to add in or make comment in regards to this, then we'll come back to members.
No, thank you, Chair. Hopefully, what we've captured is the feedback that we've had from members at the 3 seminars, and I think what you've ended up with is a set of very practicable solutions and recommendations, and clearly it's within your hands today if you want to do any further work on it, but we do feel that you've had good engagement. All councillors have had the opportunity to contribute, and as I say, we think that the 6 recommendations here are a good reflection of what would help members to be more effective and efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So, I mean, I would be keen to see it come back to the 1st of June for no other reason as that I would like to outline the way I want to present it. I would imagine Jane might or might not have some involvement if Jane was, just so I could get the consensus or kind of So the whole committee understands exactly how we want to relate it. If anyone's got particular points, then we change and adjust accordingly if that was required. I would like to see that, and you'll have had a chance to have input for any potential groups that have lapsed at the moment. That could be added as well. We'll come back to that, the recommendations. Katie, Councillor Hagman, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thank you, Liz, and your team for doing this. It has been a significant piece of work. Having gone through sort of reviews and workshops with other committees, I appreciate that, you know, it is significant. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I look forward to the 24th of June. They agree all the recommendations, and they have captured, I believe, the essence of the workshops. But I just wanted to focus there's just one bullet point, one simple line on recommendation 3, which is improvements to the council's website and search function to be taken forward. Now, really simple line. It's something that we had a lot of discussion. It's something that I raised, and actually we then had lots of members come in to confirm that their frustrations with the council website. But when I look at the analysis and what members identified, there's no reference to that at all. So, you know, I'm very keen that we take forward recommendations based on the evidence, but the evidence on that particular point, I don't see it included in what we identified. So I am aware we did have quite a long discussion on it, and I don't know if there's anything that we can add to strengthen that, because for one simple line, it actually has, you know, it has a huge impact on our council systems for both the public and for elected members. So I just wondered if we could maybe expand a little bit on the evidence that the members expressed during the seminars. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Through yourself, Chair. We do have one reference to it just in the analysis under Objective 1, but we can certainly make it more detailed to capture more of the individual comments that councillors made during the workshop. So very happy to expand that in the evidence section too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. And that's kind of points I was thinking of, Katie, when I mentioned earlier. That's the kind of thing, if it needs expanded, then it'll be a paragraph contained within the statement made to full council. David, I see you're wanting as well, Councillor David Stick.
Just a wee question. We discussed this at our group meeting yesterday, and Liz, the only problem we had was recommendation 1. Would there be resource implications involved down the line?
And I think that will depend on the request. I think the requirements that senior councillors and political groups do wish to see in the end. Certainly at the moment there is admin clerical support provided to members. I think one of the things we identified was that it's not set out, it's not articulated very clearly for you, and it happens more on an ad hoc basis. So I think by making it clearer for members, there won't necessarily be an increase in the support required, but it will give you that clarity about what is available. I suppose the one area, that additional support for senior councillors and political groups, we haven't quantified that as yet, but the discussions, the feedback we've had from 2 of the political groups would not require any additional support from 2 of the groups that we've spoken to thus far. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you, David. I think it is. I think Archie brought up the same point. Was it last time, or was it yourself, David? But my view is quite clear in that it wouldn't be extra. It would be a reconfiguration potentially, or just using the support that's potentially there at the moment in regards to that one. But that's why, again, clearly, I would like to outline what certainly my thoughts are and try and get a consensus as we go into full council. I don't see anybody else looking to come in regards to this, so I think we're quite content. The only adjustment I would make is rather than at 2.2, we'd just agree to bring that back for final consideration in the June committee, 1st of June. Councillor Jock McKee's wanting in now, Jock? David McKee, sorry, Jock.
Aye, sorry, Chair. I've asked 2 or 3 times, what's this caseworker system? And nobody can tell me. Can Elizabeth do that?
I certainly do my best, Councillor McKee.
Thank you.
Through yourself, Councillor Crothers. The caseworker system, I understand, was brought in for this council, and it's an online system to help you retain emails. It keeps the information that you have on any particularly ward matters in a systematic approach. There's records management as part of that, and that it's an online system which is available to you all. But I think one of the very clear messages that we heard throughout the recent months is that although it was advertised at the time and some members did take it up, it has not been regularly used. And like so many things, if you're not using them regularly, you stop using them really, because then it becomes more difficult about remembering passwords and just how to get the best out of the system. So I think there are a very small number of councillors who still use it, but who even then perhaps don't get the most out of the system that it offers. So I think it's about one of the recommendations is that the caseworker system could be continued, but that it's given higher profile and that members are given support and training to use it effectively.
Well, if we need passwords, I'll just pass on, because by God, I lost my phone and what a carry on I've had with passwords. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, John. Councillor Stephen Thompson. Vlad, unless you want this particular point, I see your screen coming on.
Not for that particular point, Chair. It was just more about the governance in terms of what you're proposing. Can I just get that clarified in terms of bringing it back to Audit Risk and Scrutiny prior to it going to full council?
So full council's on the 24th of June, I think, isn't it? We're on the 1st. So we'd come back at a very similar format, but what I would want to personally, because when myself present it to full council, is outline what my thoughts are in regards to each recommendation, any particular points. So if like Councillor Kate Hagman has brought up her point there in regards to, or just had points, so we'll just pick up on that and make sure that it was included. That's the type of thing. Right? I'm quite keen to see that down at committee rather than offline. There might be some offline discussions as well, obviously, and obviously the Conservative group haven't managed to speak with Fraser yet either, so we'd like to have that conversation. So if he hasn't got his invite, he'll be looking to come at the 26th of this month's meeting to discuss that with us as well, to get input from our group. So that would probably be added, I would imagine, at that point. But so minor additions to this particular report, almost a like-for-like report, but then the discussion would be predominantly how it will be getting presented to full council. Okay with that, Vlad?
Yep. Yeah.
Councillor Stephen Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just on the back of Councillor Hagman's point about the search function, I mean, I could not emphasise enough just how important that is. Most popular website in the world, in the universe even, is google.com. And there's nothing on that website apart from a search bar. And all other websites in the world lean towards Google because they want to be found by it. So they will structure their information and will pay money to sort of get people to sort of get them found on Google, because it's the user drives the search. So I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the search, because really, if you go onto the internet or whatever and you're looking for something, you type in what you're looking for, and if you can't find it, that's basically the failure. So I think there's maybe a technical thing for the web developers to look at, but it's how we index all the information we've got in a way that the search function can find it easily, not just organising things in hierarchies or navigation things or what box goes in which position on the screen. Effectively, you should be able to have something like just a search bar, and you type in whatever you need. Everything's tagged or ordered, and you could extend that even to if I want to know what are all the roadworks planned and patching squads planned for Annandale North Ward, I could just type in Annandale North Roadworks, and then all the information would be indexed, and it would actually be a transformational change to the way we record, and road inspections would be recorded differently so that they could inform that. So all the work we would do would then lean towards that search function. But anyway, so just to, it's already been agreed, so that's fine. But I mean, it's just to really add weight to it because it's so important and underpins how we actually work in the digital environment. So thanks, Chair.
No, thank you, Stephen. I think it's important that we capture this and again come back to the 1st of June. Bring it up again. Same with yourself, Katie. It'll be captured and it should be reflected because it's Lizzie's nodding. She's picking up on these comments now. So we'll make sure that these points are emphasised going into full council, because I think everybody in this committee will agree with in regards to that. With whatever part of the council's website you're searching, we need to get there fast and accurately. I don't see any other points coming up, so are we content that we've considered the draft evidence analysis and recommendations of the scrutiny review on support to elected members are settled in the appendix, and agree any changes, which we've just additionalities rather than changes? I think we've put addition to that. Lizzie's captured that and she's nodding, and agree to submit to the I think a draft, a final draft to the 1st of June's Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee. And then from that point, obviously, there'll be a recommendation there. Say this is good to go after today for full council on 24th. It'll be tight, but it'll be there just in that timeline. You okay with that, Liz, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, thank you.
Excellent. I don't see anything. I'll just double check the chat function. If there's anything here, Tracy, please give me a shout if I've missed it. Looks like you're the last person to speak, Stephen. Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, nobody else to speak to.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Tracy. Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance today. Their good input as usual. Was working to a bit of a timeline today because we've got a number of other things going on with what's going on in the background, elections and different things. So I appreciate everybody keeping their points straight to the point and in a timid fashion. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you at the next committee whenever that is. Thank you. Catch you later.